horror as something people willingly subject themselves to?
It's fun. I think people enjoy seeing a horror film or reading a scary book the way they enjoy going into a laugh in the dark or on a roller coaster ride. You go in knowing, or you go in with high expectations. And I think the ones that work on that audience are the ones that really pay off. In other words, the ones that give you that little zets and give you that involuntary response, reaction to it that you went in hoping to get.
I think something else that horror does is society gives points, you know, for good emotional behavior. So we get points for exercising those emotional muscles that society approves of: love, friendship, loyalty, humor, that sort of thing. But for every one of those good emotions, we have a dark one as well. We have fear, we have aggressiveness, we have anger, we all have, I suppose, urges that sometimes tend towards sadism, that sort of thing. And a horror story or a horror movie gives us a chance to exercise that side in a comparatively harmless way.
Exorcised?
Exorcised. Yeah.
Do you fellows happen to specialize in this field and could just as easily be in another one? Or if not, then mustn't you be weird in some way?
I don't know, I work at a car wash, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I really wonder about that. I was trying to think of a tactful way to put it. But,
I don't think we're any more weird
I think
than
Steve
the
is
people
weird.
who enjoy the things we produce. I think it's the same thing. We're just producers and they're consumers, but we're subject to the same emotions and working with
but there has to
them.
be some real reason that you're in this field and not another one.
Well, I think you have a predilection toward it.
Yeah.
Ira Levin and I discovered that as children, we entertained other children by telling ghost stories to them. And so it was there, and I think I made mine up, but I'm sure he made his up. And it was just a way of exercising our imaginations that we came to very young.
I was warped as a child. So a lot of horror comics in my past, and a lot of horror movies and that sort of thing. And it warped me as a kid. And
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously warped me. And the thing is, I think that see, they know. In the world as it is today, though, I think if you don't have a few warps in your record, you can't get along. And that's one of the great appeals that the horror story has. There's been a lot of analysis, a lot of it almost ludicrous, it seems to me, about horror in the wake of the big hits like George's Dawn of the Dead and Ghost Story and The Shining and all of that sort of thing. And really, I think what a lot of it is a sort of harmless blow-off for anxieties and bad feelings.
Yeah. Where would we have seen your warpedness if we'd known you earlier, before you began?
I get rid of most of it through this sort of thing. People say, well, do you have bad dreams? And the answer is no. I give them all to somebody else. I sleep well. And it works that way for the writer, I think, or the filmmaker as well. I guess there's a kind of blow-off. And
if you didn't have that blow-off, would you be haunting graveyards and doing
Graveyards might be haunting you. I think you're tapping another emotion. I mean, I've often felt that to some extent with me it was accident. There were genre films that I loved of all different types. I love jungle movies. And had my first hit been a jungle movie, I might be a great jungle movie maker. But so to that extent it was accidental. And but I think there's a list of those involuntary emotions. Laughter, if you can make an audience laugh, cry, startle. Those are the things that you're really trying to do, and that's what you're sort of honing your work down to try to accomplish, to get that involuntary response out. And it's those involuntary responses that make people say, gee, that was great. But when people say about Salem's Lot, geez, I loved it, they're basically saying it scared the hell out of me. It's clear cut. It's basically a different response that you get from a reader that read Salem's Lot or Rosemary's Baby than you get from a reader that read The Winds of War. If you ask someone, did you like The Winds of War, they'll go into 10 minutes about you know, but if you ask someone, did you like Rosemary's Baby, what they immediately respond to is, yeah, it scared me. What they mean is, it scared me.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that wonderful moment in Kubrick's film where Nicholson looks through the door and says, "Here's Johnny." My kids run around and say that now. You know? I have a 3-year-old who
In The
goes around.
Shining?
Yeah. I have a 3-year-old boy who goes around saying, "Daddy's not here now." The little finger thing. It's very funny. Yeah. Another thing.
He's
that,
not warped then.
of course he's warped.
He's
yeah.
warped.
He's very warped. One of the things that all these genres do, I responded to what George said about if his first hit had been a jungle picture, because you take all of these things and they're genres. There's horror, there's, for instance, the crime picture, my God, can this be the end of Rico? Jungle pictures, all of these things. And what all this genre fiction does, mysteries, is they make the writer or the filmmaker tell a real story. You know, and I think in a lot of ways you just gravitate toward that idea of story. You want to tell tales.
That's very important, I think. I think that's the heart of it, really. That there's a story which can engulf you and grab your lapels the way fairy tale did when you were 6 years old.
And you can't tell a story. You can't tell a story. I mean, you can't scare anybody unless there's a story
Unless there's
and
a strong
characters for them to
narrative.
be involved in.
Sure, yeah. Right.
Scares
So
don't exist in a vacuum.
So you're forced
Some
into
real
telling a
set.
story, as you're saying.
Gee, I haven't seen you in a long time.
It's 9 months.
Is it exactly?
Oh, it's approximately 9 months, yeah. It's 10 months, maybe.
What was the last time you were here now? What happened exactly? I'm trying to remember.
Well, I was on with Haile Selassie.
No, you weren't.
Oh, who was I on with?
Well, of course, we're thinking of the time you were on with Gore Vidal and Ms. Janet Flanner, and a whole thing erupted here. And I still hear about that to this day. People say, "Wow, what was it like to be there? Did you think anybody was going to hit anybody? Could you tell what was happening? Weren't you scared? Were you excited?" And all, I don't know if you heard.
Well, did you notice how Gore kept touching his head all through the show? So like this?
It doesn't stand out in my memory, but I'm willing to.
Well, you remember he'd be sitting there thinking, well, you remember I did all the talking. And it's the only debate that where people said who was the winner when one man did all the talking.
Well, you let others talk. Yeah.
Only when I was obliged to. I felt I had 10 times as much to say that night.
Well, an enormous amount of mail came in about it, because I must have said at the end, "Let us know who won," which someone
Well,
pointed
you
out
know,
indicated that I was only interested in staging fights on television or something. Others said, "None of you won. You're all creeps, and you should get lost." And
Well, of course, the remark, "they're all creeps," is the last resort of a gallivanting mind.
couldn't have put it better myself. I don't think. Maybe as well, but certainly not better.
You could put it as well, I know that.
You know, when you walk
wasn't
out
that
here,
good.
there's a certain excitement about you, like certain theatrical stars. I mean, there's always a glint in your eye, and I try to guess by the kind of, you have a sort of pugilist's walk, as you know, and
It's been called waddling.
no, but it's as distinct as Bob Hope's walk or Jack Benny's, or any performer who has a distinct walk. The Mailer walk is sounds like a dance, but it's a. Are you aware of
No,
that?
I always thought it was just part of my general gracelessness.
No?
But
Well, you're your own severest. I can do it if you'd like to see it.
No.
I would.
Oh,
No, I don't mean, go ahead, do it.
I don't mean it as an insult.
We're here to offer pleasure. Go ahead and...
No, mimicry is not an insult, but a form of compliment. But I think I can do
You're
the.
thinking of parodies
I
here.
think I can do the Mailer walk. I don't know, but I'll see. Wait a minute. Let me see. And here he is.
Norman
Norman-
Mailer.
Actually, you made me look good.
I did it rather subtly. I didn't want to exaggerate.
It was nice.
But it is true. And,
But, I wish I walked that well.
it's a distinctive walk. Say, I have a note passed to me that you were going on the Apollo voyage. Not Sir Arthur Clarke. Arthur Clarke and a group of men have hired a boat and
some people have apparently hired a boat, and they're going to a cruise ship, and they're going to be anchored. They're going to leave New York 2 days before the launching of Apollo 17. It is Apollo 17. It's the last launch in any case. It's a 17 or 18.
It's the last one in the series. I didn't realize it was that high.
And it's the last time a man's going to land on the moon for 10, 15, or 20 years. And at any rate, so they're forming up this cruise ship, and they're going to sail down from New York and anchor off Cocoa Beach. Not Cocoa Beach, but anchor off Cape Canaveral, where the bird is going to go up. And it's going to be done at night. It's going to be a night launching. So it's going to be the most extraordinary piece of fireworks in the 20th century at its
Yes,
peak.
Arthur Clarke was here some months ago talking about that, and he said it will light up the entire state of Florida.
If the sky is clear.
Ah, he didn't mention that.
Otherwise, it will merely look like the roseate fires of hell. The murk and the smoke, and you won't be able to see much. But I think the sky will be clear.
Well, if it's not clear, they probably wouldn't do the launch.
They're laying
Well,
6-1 in Vegas that the sky will be clear.
Aren't they raiding the Queen Elizabeth, or they were going to? Maybe they're not.
I don't know the details. It's some huge ship. Anyway, I'm going on it because I've always wanted to see another launch. It's possibly the most spectacular sight I ever saw in my life.
Your description of the one launch is the best ever written, if I do say so, with you sitting here.
Thank you. There haven't been that many.
Want to see your walk again now? I wondered that night that we had that set 2 on the show with you and Gore Vidal. I thought you avoided me later one night in public. I ran into you and I was sort of going to say hello, and I thought maybe you were sore.
Where was this?
You looked at me, but then you turned and kept going.
I'm unendurably vain, and I never wear my glasses.
You wouldn't avoid it. You're not the kind of man who turns
No,
on
I
his
would have.
heel.
I would have come up to you afterward and said, "What were you? Why were you taking Gore's side before you knew what it was all about?" I wanted to talk to you. My feelings were hurt.
Were they really?
Yeah, I thought, what? I said, all right, I've done some bad things to Cavett in the past, but what's he losing his temper for? That remark about folded 5 times, that old Nebraska saying, that was dreadful to pull on me. I mean, you've been saving it.
Oh,
You
yes.
can fold it 5 times and put it where the moon don't shine. Now, that's a remark that you save to use 3 times in your life.
I did say that, didn't I?
And,
I'm ashamed.
it was a modest remark. I stopped, talk about pugilating. I stopped like, my hair went out.
You look like that picture of Floyd Patterson.
Well, yeah, when those fighters really have a sweat up and they get onto that awful right, the one goes, well, we did it, but
Didn't expect that.
Stone Pole, ran right into it.
I'm not aware of him saving that for so long.
My knee buckled, and I said, "Did you just make that up?" And you said Tolstoy, and I said, "No." I had such admiration for you that I said, "No," I said, "You made it up."
That's right. Well, you felt bad, really? I mean, are your feelings that close to the surface that a mere television buffoon like myself could hurt them?
We'll pass over the endless complications of the last remark.
Right. I think that's just as well, especially as a man with a wheeze.
No, my feelings weren't hurt that much. They whenever I can feel the remotest twinge of pain in myself, I examine it. I'm delighted. By now, I'm just a big, overworked, empty shell of a man, and when something happens that gives me some feeling, I'm delighted, you see.
So I made you feel alive.
I felt sore slightly and slightly hurt. And actually, you see, there's something that went on that show that you didn't know about. That was background to it, unless Gore whispered to you.
No.
But what happened was that I was so mad at Gore that when I saw him in the dressing room before we went on, I butted him in the head.
Really?
That's why he kept touching his forehead through the show.
You mean you actually punched
I didn't
him?
punch him. I wouldn't punch him in the forehead with my fist.
That sounded dumb.
I mean,
Yeah,
waste
I didn't know-
my writing hand on that skull.
You mean that thing where you...
What did you do?
I butted him with my head.
Oh, bunted him.
Butted.
Butted him, goat-like.
like a goat,
yes.
yes.
Oh, I got it.
Both my parents were born in the sun. Their sign is a Capricorn.
Doesn't that hurt you? You mean you took your forehead and whacked his forehead?
Yeah, I'm fairly good at that. I'm not the world's champ at it.
I love it. It's a terrific thing.
It does not hurt the giver, but only the receiver?
Oh, you can get wrecked doing that. It's
You got to know just how to do it.
a friend of mine and I once did it one night at P.J. Clark's, and we butted each other in the head about 5 times. And it's the only time I remember ever backing out of it. I don't know, I mean, there are people who can take me, and I just never got into it with them. I could help it. But with this guy, I looked at him, I said, Tom, would you be willing to accept a draw? And he said, because if he didn't, we would have had to go on. He said, well, Norman, if you want a draw, I'll accept a draw. This is Tom Quinn, my old friend Tom Quinn.
You could see 3 of them by that time, probably.
No, I just knew if it went on, I was going to lose a sizable portion of my IQ. And he said afterward that when I left, because we shook hands and we weren't even fighting, we were in the sweetest of moods. We loved each other so much we had to butt heads, you know.
It's a kind of
yes,
a male.
it's known as sexism and racism. And
There are animals who do. There's some kind of mountain goat that does that. You can hear it like sounds like a shotgun shot in the mountains. But I didn't know that there were humans doing it.
The Baylor is, and so it's.
What's the one you didn't?
Well, you didn't let me tell you what Tom. I never could finish a story around you, Dick.
I'm sorry.
Tom just said after I left, he turned to his wife and he said, "Honey, has my forehead fallen down to my nose?"
He actually felt injured.
He felt as if his skin had fallen loose, as if it had been cut and it had come down here. And I felt as if I had met the Lord and he was apocalyptic in his lightning wrath. I mean, every time Tom hit me, this lightning bolt went from the top of my head down to my toes.
Say, what's the fun in this?
The fun of it is that I'd never been beaten until then.
And did you expect Vidal to keel over, or how did he endure the attack?
No, look, Gore, I don't really, I wouldn't talk against Gore, except that he always talks at his best about me when I'm not around, and it's very silent when I'm there. So I will say that Gore's greatest and only problem is that he's a physical coward. So it was brutal to attack him in the dressing room.
Physical coward?
Yeah. Well, you remember when Bill Buckley...
Are you proud of yourself for attacking a coward?
No, I just thought he deserved it. I wouldn't normally attack a coward.
He is bigger than you are.
Oh, he's decent. Look, you remember when Bill Buckley said to him something on the order of, I speak generally because I don't remember the exact words, something on the order of, shut your mouth or I'm going to paste you one. It was a famous moment on television.
Yeah, I'll sock you in the mouth and you'll stay plastered, I think was the exact quote.
All Gore had to do is stand up and take Buckley out with one punch, and Gore Vidal, not George McGovern, would be running for president right now. Gore missed the opportunity of his life, and he's been seething ever since. He sat there in his chair like this. It was a dreadful moment.
Well, I don't know if you know this,
Democrats,
but Buckley takes boxing lessons once a week.
He did after that, I think.
Say, I'm just looking at a copy of your new book, which is called, I said I didn't know what the title meant, St. George and the Godfather. I assume that George is McGovern.
It's a reasonable assumption, yes.
Yeah, I'm very good at these things. And the Godfather is...
It's also a reasonable assumption who the Godfather is.
Oh, I see. It's about the... This is a very peculiar... We live in a business full of sham, as you know, and this is sent over by the publisher, and it's not actually your book.
No, no, it isn't at all.
It's the cover of your book, but inside it, where the guts of the book would be, is something called Managing Through Insight. I opened it, and it didn't sound like your style at all. Strange, these things. I suppose there are people who collect this sort of thing.
Well, you know why that happened. It isn't that my publishers are incompetent. It's that the book won't be out until tomorrow in New York, I think, and the rest of the country next week, because I only finished it last week.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Well, you see, it was...
But you'd written it for life, hadn't you?
No, I did. I'd undertaken to write a piece for life on the Democratic Convention, and I did something that was foolhardy, which is I said I'd do it in 5 days because I was feeling too cocky. Mm-hmm. So I did write 17,000 words in 5 days for life, and that was what was published there. But then there was still an awful lot to write about the Democratic Convention. I just couldn't begin to write all I had to write about that. Mm-hmm. And of course, there was still the Republican Convention to do. So I finished off the Democratic Convention. Then I went to Washington, interviewed Eagleton and McGovern and Kissinger. That's in the middle of the book. And then I did the Republican Convention, and that, everybody said it was going to be a boring convention, and I thought it would be, after I'd seen it. I thought it'd be boring to write about. And instead, I went on for 50,000 words. So the book is now a full-length book. It's 80,000 words, and I finished it last week and handed it in, and they rushed it. It's going to come out in order to come out, 5 or 6 weeks before the election. And it'll be out this week, and or next week early. And to my knowledge, it's the first time it's been done by a supposedly a good author.
Supposedly.
Well, if I say a good author, and everybody says, "Oh, he's so vain, he's unendurable,"
Yeah,
so
supposedly.
a so-called good author.
Well, how do you account for the fact that the Republican convention, which was generally acknowledged to be not the most exciting event ever to take place, you could get that many words out of it?
Well, I decided that The Godfather was a genius while I was watching that convention, and it always people used to sneer at Nixon years ago, and now they've got to the point where they talk about what a smart politician he is and how he's the smartest politician, and that's like saying that Muhammad Ali is a nice boxer. It doesn't begin to get into what really is there. Muhammad Ali is possibly the greatest boxer who's ever lived. It's quite possible, and it's possible that Richard Nixon is a great political genius of a not altogether endurable sort. I call him the Godfather for good cause, which is that I think generally it's agreed, and certainly since Puzo's book, it's been agreed that the Godfather is a man who really knows how to run society very well. And he runs a society which is very good up to a point. It's just that there are certain excesses in this society which keep it from being called properly a civil society. To wit, not in Puzo's book, but generally what we know is that while the mafia runs things very, very well, still they live on a base of heroin addiction. Not their addiction, but the addiction of others. In other words, their money comes basically out of drugs. And so by the same token, Nixon's political genius resides in, on the one hand, being able to make peace, and the other hand, being able to wage war. And finally, his success rests on the fact that he's able to continue that war in Vietnam, and that he's been able to pull off the greatest deception in the history of American politics, which is that we're not fighting a war.
While he fights the war.
While he fights the war, and while in fact he drops, dare I use that figure again, but he drops 1 million tons of bombs a year, which is an extraordinary amount. In his administration, he dropped, in the 3.5 years since he's been in, he's dropped 3.5 million tons of bombs. That's almost twice as much as the total bombs that we drop on Europe and the Pacific and all over in World War II and in Korea. Remember those fantastic raids that went on all during Europe when you were a kid and I was a young man in the Army? You remember we used to read 1,000 planes over Dresden, 1,000 planes over Berlin, 2,000 planes, greatest mass raid ever, that sort of thing? Yeah. Well, you add all that up, and it is considerably less than the bombs that Nixon's dropped in Vietnam, which is a country which doesn't have any industry to speak of.
Now, people always say, but the bombing isn't working to end the war. You're implying that that's precisely why it's used, because it continues the war is that the point, that it's a way of continuing the war?
Well, it gets into matters that are so deep about America and our funny relation to the world, because on the one hand, we're I keep talking always about the schizophrenia of America, because one lives with it. On the one hand, we're a vastly moral nation. There's no doubt in my mind that we are the cleanest and most orderly nation. Our small towns are cleaner than the small towns of any other place in the world, probably even cleaner than British small towns. But so on the one hand, we're the cleanest nation in the world. On the other hand, we're the damn dirtiest nation in the world. I mean, we're filthy. And it goes on in the same kind of soul, which is essentially a Republican soul. It's a large remark, but finally I'd say that there's something about republicanism that's equal to, some of my best friends are. But there's something about republicanism that is truly schizophrenic.
Yeah, there's a polarity there.
Fuzzy hand class.
I like that. That was good.
Did you like that?
I like that. Yeah. Do more.
Okay, I'll do that again. I think I know how to do
yes.
it now. Sammy Kahn, who must be familiar to you.
Yes, he's familiar to me.
Said on this show one time that the closest a man can come to understanding childbirth is to be involved in a musical coming to Broadway, or words to that effect. Probably the rhythm was better when he said it. But is it more traumatic than anything else?
Well, it may even have been put more aptly by Larry Gelbart. I think you probably know how he referred to doing a musical. He said
Does it involve the Fuhrer?
Yes, he said he wished that Hitler were alive today and out of town trying a musical. Yes. That would be his punishment.
It's hard to top that.
It was my experience in the past. This is the fourth musical I did. I did Little Me and Promises, Promises and Sweet Charity. And because I was not really familiar with the form, and I don't think one ever really gets familiar with it, it's difficult. But this one was not the case because it's an original. And so I felt that I was doing a play, and I felt very much at home with this.
That made the difference between doing a full-out musical where
well,
you
it
have
still
to...
has its problems because the collaboration is enormous. You are working constantly with a composer and a lyricist. The lyricist is trying to write in the same style in which you write so that it seems seamless, that you don't know what is dialogue and what is sung.
And so it doesn't sound like they stop your show to do his songs or her songs.
I think probably one of the best examples of it ever, of a lyricist writing in the form of or in the style of a playwright is Alan J. Lerner's in My Fair Lady. I mean,
yes.
It sounded like Shaw wrote the lyrics, in which he did, in fact, in certain areas, that Alan was able to take some of Shaw's lyrics and embellish them.
Shaw wrote
Not
lyrics?
his lyrics. No. I don't always talk clearly. I think clearly.
We don't require
but I don't talk
here.
Clearly. I don't know what I've said so far.
You meant Shaw's words, of course, and make them involve it in the lyrics.
Yes.
So it's conceivable that Shaw somewhere said, "Why can't a woman be more like a man?" Or
probably, possibly,
something like that.
Yeah.
Tell me about the people you select to entrust your baby to. Robert Moore, is it?
Is the director?
Yeah. And Herb Ross has done things in film and so on.
I usually stay with the same people that I have success with. I've done 4 plays with Mike Nichols, 3 movies and a play with Herbert Ross, and this is my 6th show with Bob Moore. 4 plays, 2 films, and Bob is going to be doing the film of Chapter 2.
What do you find in them that makes them the ones?
A rapport, an understanding, a way of translating what I have to say onto the stage or in films better than a lot of other people can do, including myself.
Do you have absolute control, finally, of what scenes are taken out, for example, what actors are replaced if necessary? There isn't a lot of replacing in Neil Simon shows, is there? You seem to almost always go with the people you started with.
Occasionally we have replaced people, but they are generally people that I've had no experience with before. A new actor or new actress, and they do an audition, and I say, if it's not a star part, sounds right to me, let's go with it, and then you find out. It's happened to me twice where we had to let go of somebody, but generally, no. Lucy Arnaz came to audition for this show. I had never seen Lucy's work. I never even saw her on the old Lucy shows.
You don't watch the $20,000 Pyramid?
Oh, was she on that? No. But she came to read for this play, and I knew within 5 pages, less than that she was right. The same thing with Robert Klein. With Robert Klein, there was another story because there was another actor we were very interested in.
Who was it? Is he sitting here?
He was quite good, but I knew that Robert was coming in the afternoon after him, and I said, oh, I'm in big trouble because I know I'm going to have to make a decision. I like it when I don't have to make a decision. Generally, in auditions, the actor makes the decision because they are so right that they say to you, this is it. You know, you must hire me for the role.
Diane Keaton did that to you once.
Yes, she did, and did not get the part because I did not have the final decision in that case.
Why not? How can you possibly be in a situation where you don't?
Well, that's a very ticklish situation, that particular picture, but it was a director who said, if I don't get the person that I want, I will not do the picture. Well, I wanted this director very much.
Oh, I see.
So I said, okay, I'm sorry to lose Diane. Diane was not the star that she is now, but this other person got the one she wanted, who was nominated for an award. So she was very right.
So if you had it to do over, you wouldn't know what to do, probably.
I would go with Diane Keaton because I just think she's terrific.
I kind of interrupted you there, though. You were talking about, you're saying with Klein and Arnaz, and the actor will
So Robert came
make the decision.
in the afternoon, and he has the ear, the sound, the rhythm I guess it's very New York, as you can tell from this guttural sound you hear. It just sounded like me, and in a sense, so many of the characters that I write about are me.
Sure.
I think this character, despite the fact that there were a lot of stories going around that the play is based on the life of Marvin Hamlish and Carol Sager, or at least their relationship, in a sense it is. But when I sit down to write, they turn out to be me, because they do ultimately say the things that I think of.
Sure.
So Robert just seemed the perfect guy, and I envision and I know that in the future I will do more projects with Robert and with Lucy.
They're delightful performers, they really are. Do you feel any kind of shift of gears or gender wrench or anything you have to make when you write the woman's part?
No. Why?
Does she talk like you too? You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. Well, no, but what I do is, you have to assume that person's identity. Each line you are shifting back and forth. That's why it's hard, I think, for me to write plays with many, many characters in it, because it's jumping around a lot.
Yes, I used to think that a playwright probably writes one whole character all the way through, because how can you possibly switch from Stanley Kowalski to Blanche Dubois?
My father very naively and sweetly asked me when I was writing the Bilko show, he said, do you write just Phil Silver's lines, or do you write everybody's lines? Because he thought it was very difficult, and it is. But yes, one does, I do, well, every writer does, obviously, assume the character. And you try to become that character, but I think something of you obviously must come through, your own perspective of what that person is.
You don't ever feel you have the problem, you probably wouldn't ever have the problem unless you stop to think about it, but some people will say about a writer, his women are weak, or his men are weak, or her men are weak, as if they can't
well, I have heard that in the past, that the women are weak, but I just read a recent piece by Vincent Canby in the New York Times about California Suite, in which he said all of the women are strong and all of the men are weak.
Meaning the characters were written strongly.
Yes. I don't know why, but I find it more interesting to write strong women.
And they come from you.
From me? Yes. Who else is there? Yes.
Right. Unless you believe that other writers get into the mind of the writer, which is also...
Other writers?
Yes. Yes, there's a man who said, I realized that I was writing other people's short stories for a very long time.
I did once. I did try to write through the mind of another writer, and it came out quite successful. It was The Heartbreak Kid, and it was based on a short story by Bruce J. Friedman. And it had nothing to do with the style in which I write, but I loved it. It was called A Change of Plan, very short story, about 3 or 4 pages, about a boy who gets married, goes off to Florida on his honeymoon. His wife is back in the hotel. He goes down to the pool and sees another girl that he falls in love with immediately and knows that he made a mistake. That's about all there was to the short story. And so I was able to get the property and turn it into a film, but I knew the only way to write it successfully was not to do it through my own mind, but to do it through Bruce J. Friedman's mind. I did not know Bruce. I never even met Bruce. But I had read enough of his book, Stern and A Mother's Kisses, to know his style.
You had him in your inner ear?
I think I can do that. If I had to write in the style of other writers, I guess it's the form of satire in a way. But I enjoy doing it.
Or parody at the very least.
Well, this isn't really parody, I guess. It's doing an original in his... Parody's okay, because I don't want to go on with this.
Okay. I'll go on with it, and you can jump in at any point. Do you hear the voices in your head of the actors you know are going to play a part? Or have you ever been in that position? Have you ever known that you were writing for, say, George Burns?
No. George...
That would be the last
example,
one, because he was not the original.
The only time I ever did it was for The Goodbye Girl, for Richard Dreyfuss and for Marsha Mason.
Oh, sure.
For those who don't know about my married life.
Yeah.
But no, I never do, because I must think of them as characters, as living people, because I am always writing about somebody I know about. The casting comes later on.
So the part played by Walter Matthau was really in your head as it came into the typewriter, your neighbor in Queens or whatever.
Which one are you talking about?
Oh, I was just making up an example, but I mean, do you hear that source character in your head?
Absolutely.
In dialect or whatever?
For example, The Sunshine Boys, in which Walter played the film, was based on a number of old vaudevillians. Joe Smith of Smith and Dale is one of them. Willie Howard of Eugene and Willie Howard. There was even a little bit of the Ritz Brothers in there. They were all old comics, and I had met them all when I was a young kid growing up in New York and going to see whatever comedian there was. So they all were in my mind, and Walter, came last. Yeah. Although Walter did come in the middle of The Odd Couple, because I had written 2 acts of The Odd Couple. I had not finished the 3rd act, but I met Walter at a party. Walter was not yet a star, and I had seen him do Guys and Dolls at the City Center and thought he was brilliant, and also saw him do an occasional television show. But I saw him at this party, and I said, I'm doing a play for you. I want you to do this play next year. And he said, when you finish it, send it to me. And I did. He read it, and he called me back, and he said, I love it. I want to do it, but I want to do Felix Unger. I don't want to do Oscar.
You had him in mind as the other character.
As Oscar. Sure. Oscar is, who Oscar is. Yeah. Well, that's the one I wanted him to play, obviously. Yeah. He wanted to play Felix. I said, why? He said, Oscar's too easy for me. He said, I could phone in Oscar. He said, I want to act. So I said, act in somebody else's play. Do that.
But he would like to have played the fastidious man because
Yes.
it's against type.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could he have done it?
He did it one day on a television show. We were on a show together, and we had talked about this, and he said, I always wanted to play Felix. I said, okay, let's do it. So I had the book, and I read Oscar, and he read Felix, and I said, you see, I was right.
That's not fair. Did it occur to you to ask Robert Redford to do this most recent play before you had anyone else in mind?
Which? They're playing our song?
Yeah.
I don't think he sings. Does he?
He may, I don't know, but people tend to forget that he was a Neil Simon actor, both on the stage and on the screen
Yes,
at one
in
point.
Barefoot in the Park. No, it
And
had
people
not
always
occurred to
want
me.
to say, if you'd only seen Redford do one of those Broadway comedies, you don't get that.
You don't
he doesn't get
it.
a chance to show that off
But
in the films.
I know that he wants to do one again, and who knows, it may happen. As a matter of fact, he was there at the show last night, and he seemed to enjoy it very much, and we talked about it, and I would like to write one for him.
Redford wasn't there last night because I was.
I confuse you so, the two of you.
Yes, casting people do too all the time.
Yes.
Have you noticed that? Was he actually there?
Actually, in person.
I was there and seemed to enjoy myself. too.
Yes?
I noticed you take the word
You
scene.
were the one without the crowd around you, right?
I do that. I create a distraction for him by repelling people,
Right.
you see.
Right.
Can you say, Neil, what looking back at your blockbuster successes, as opposed to those that have only, say, been successes, what the ones have in common that were the big winners?
I would guess...
Goodbye Girl, for example, on film.
a strong identity with the audience. The ones that seem too exotic, too removed from them, for example, God's Favorite or The Good Doctor, those are exercises in playwriting and something that I get off on, but not necessarily the audience. But the things that they can relate to, when they come up to me outside and say, that's my life, or that's my uncle, that's my grandfather, that was me. I've had women come up to me about the Odd Couple and say, that's my life. Because obviously 2 women living together are going to go through the same circumstances. Yeah. So I think that's the common denominator in the most successful pieces.
People are always urging you to get a little more serious and a little more serious. And do you have an interiors, referring to Woody's movie?
No, I met Woody recently and told him how much I loved that. I thought it was super work, and I wish I could do that. I've attempted serious pieces, The Gingerbread Lady for one, but I think, in a sense, most of the good plays, at least the latter plays, are serious. Certainly Prisoner of Second Avenue and Chapter 2 are serious plays, but in my own life, there's a great deal of humor. I neither see life as all tragic or all humor, and so I try to get both of them into the play. Woody consciously left out all of the humor in Interiors. Had I written it, I would have put in humor and probably would not have been as successful as he was.
Yes, you would have to keep fighting back the obvious places where you knew you could get a laugh by the elaborate construction of...
It's so tricky that sometimes I write something that I don't even mean to be funny, and it comes out funny. There's something about the situation, yeah.
Do you mean by that you'll hear a single line get a laugh that you didn't know was a laugh line in a play, or a whole scene will be funny that you thought was not?
Well, for example, this may not be a good example, but in Plaza Suite, we were out of town, and the first playlet, one-act play, was about a husband and wife who were married for 23 years, and they go back to the Plaza Hotel. She's trying to recreate the evening of their honeymoon because their marriage is falling apart, and she wants to revitalize it. There was a great deal of humor in the beginning, but as they start to get into the confrontation of why their marriage is falling apart, Mike Nichols and myself wanted the play to become more serious. It was quite moving, but they were laughing at a lot of moments. So Mike said to me, let's take out all of the laughs in that section because it's hurting what it is that we want to accomplish. We took out all the laughs, and the audience found other places to laugh at that we did not even mean, because there's something in the atmosphere, I guess, in the scene which I created that was humorous. So that balance is a very delicate one.
Yeah. Are there any comics you'd never work for again?
Comics?
Uh-huh. You wrote in the old days for most of the biggies, I think.
Well, I mean, I did not enjoy working for Jackie Gleason. I admire him.
That surprises me.
Well, I worked very briefly for him, and I don't think my brother and I were too successful with Jackie. There were a lot of comedians I did not enjoy working with, but...
Doesn't he value the written word, though?
Oh, he's terrific, and his writers were wonderful. And the honeymoon shows, I watch it and love it, but it's something that I just was not able to do. I guess it's the sound of my rhythms are not the same as Jackie's. Maybe today would be different. He's quite a different performer. I really enjoyed him in Smokey and the Bandit, which I've seen on the plane every time I go to California.
He's a wonderful conversationalist.
I know.
I wish I'd done more of this sort of thing with him.
Yeah.
In fact, I hope to.
Harpo was another one I don't think I'd like to write. My dialogue never went well with Harpo. I don't know why.
He mispronounced the words.
Yes, Marcel Marceau, another one, died every time.
Did you meet Harpo, ever?
No, I didn't.
Everybody loved him. I'm so sorry I didn't meet him. I had a chance to once, and something else seemed more important. Now I can't remember what the other thing was. You ever have that experience?
Yes.
Yeah. What's wrong with television these days? If you were in the golden age, I'm sorry, I was thinking ahead of television, and if it isn't the leaden age now, it's some even baser metal.
Yeah.
It seems to me that there's almost nothing humorous about the alleged humor on television.
Well, for the
and you
most
watch people watching it, and they sit there and they just stare, and the laugh track laughs, and they continue to stare, and then they turn it off, and they say, "Do you like it?" And they said, "Oh yeah, it was funny."
I wonder if they think it's funny. I don't think they have any choice. They watch what the network puts on. I wonder, because that's something one always talks about, are the good old days better than these days? Because I'm sure in the days of the golden era of television, there was as much garbage on.
Sure.
But the only explanation I have is that it was a smaller audience, and whenever you work for a smaller audience, you can afford to be more sophisticated. You don't have to worry about satisfying the needs of 100 million people.
Well, then by small, you all must imply also better quality somehow.
Yes,
Were they richer people who could afford TV sets?
Probably. I think they were more sophisticated. You were dealing mostly with urban areas. They're only in the big cities that they have television. We're talking back in the early 50s now. So I think, consequently, well, for example, when we did the Show of Shows, in those days we were doing satires of Japanese films. Now you know.
And Ingmar Bergman films. When I laughed at the satire without ever having seen the Bergman films.
Now you know that only in the major cities of America were they seeing these films.
Really getting it.
Yeah. So we were aimed at that audience, and I guess we were very much like Saturday Night Live.
That's funny. I don't see any similarity, but I know what you mean.
That's what I meant. I want to get along with you, Dick.
Well, I want you to like me, so
I don't know
I'm beginning to see a
see
similarity now. Yes,
I do see what you mean,
do you?
And yet I see what I mean, because they make me laugh occasionally.
Yeah.
I mean, about half the show is terrible and half the show is absolutely wonderful.
But what's fun about it, though, is sometimes the outrageously sophomoric sketch that they will go right to the end without any apologies.
Yes, I say
or
soon they'll
anything,
get to something funny, and they don't. But when Belushi does the samurai, I mean, I just love it.
Yeah. It's fun to do that show. I hosted it a couple of times.
Did you? Yeah.
And it's the only place left, I suppose, or at the moment where you can get a taste of what it must have been like for Milton Berle and the people who did a live show all the way through, the fun of running to change costumes, and a guy's getting ready to cue you and you don't have your mustache on and so on. It's wonderful fun
But
to
I
do.
do
I
think-
recommend it. I think you should host it some night.
They did ask me once.
You were scared.
Yes, panicked. Panicked.
But wouldn't you agree that the general level of television writing is written rotten?
Yes, it is. It's really rote bad. Yeah,
Or by road?
it sure is. I don't watch enough of it to, not if there's a football game or a movie on.
You know, Fred Allen predicted, and Groucho concurred, that the laugh track would kill comedy because there was no necessity for the writers to be funny anymore. They always knew there would be a laugh supplied. And as Fred Allen pointed out, in many
absolutely true.
cases, the pre-recorded audiences that were laughing were dead before the jokes were.
Well, that's true. I
So
mean,
you
that's-
had dead people laughing at dead material.
That's why the theater is so hard and movies are so hard, because you do not have that, and consequently it makes the quality better, I think.
Are there any Neil Simon destroyed manuscripts, anything you committed to the flames after reading it?
They're in the drawer, in an asbestos drawer. I don't want them destroyed yet, but I start many plays that I give up on. And I just
Didn't you
put
write a
in the
whole
drawer.
movie for Burt Reynolds and Marcia?
Yes, but I'm going to do that.
I mean, Miss Mason?
Yes, I'm going to do that. It just seemed wrong. Bert seemed not right for it, or my material seemed not right for Bert, and it was not what I wanted to do at that time. I have to get into the mood of a particular piece. In other words, I have to say, I want to do a love story now, or I really want to dig into my own personal background and do something like Chapter 2. I'm going to do the film of Chapter 2 next. Consequently, after that, I think I would want to do something a lot lighter, so we will probably do this picture that you mentioned, which I wish you didn't mention in that way.
What have you got against the Star-Spangled Girl? You said somewhere you'd like to bury it if you could.
Well, Walter Kerr said Neil Simon didn't have an idea for a play this year, but he wrote it anyway. And it was
With
true.
him.
It was my eagerness to write a play rather than having a play that I was eager to write. It was a good idea, basically, but I made the major mistake of writing about a place that I had never been to, San Francisco, at that time. I had never been to San Francisco, yet I set the play there. Writing about a girl I had never met, and had I met her, I would have hated her. So
you had two things.
yeah, those two things are enough to make you hate the play.
What kind of paper do you type on?
Yellow.
Really?
Yes.
So do I.
Yes?
I had a feeling we had a kinship there. I love that. That yellow is kind of slick, not the cheap, flimsy
Oh,
kind,
no,
but
not the heavy,
slightly
heavy stuff. Yes, for posterity.
Yeah.
The white seems like it's too, it's like doing a crossword puzzle with a pen. I mean, that's permanent.
It's too final,
I'm not
isn't
ready
it?
for the white
Right.
paper yet.
Yeah. But the people who invested in coercible bond years ago are millionaires, thanks to you. You must have
Yes.
depleted several forests by this time.
Well, no, not
Just
quite.
with your
because
rejects.
I don't work with carbons, see. So that's half the paper I don't usually use, which is really living dangerously because I only have one copy.
You could leave it in a cab.
Yes, there is a cab driver now who's got a play opening in the spring.
I think I had him then. Yeah, and it sounds awful. He tried out some of the lines on me.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, that just jammed what I wanted to ask you. Do you realize how great the writing was on radio when we were kids? Now, that's something that does stand up under the test of time. Occasionally, a radio buff will send me a tape of an old Fibber McGee and Molly show, or Bergen, and there's really witty, wonderful dialogue in there that...
Yeah. it's
What's the
true.
last time anyone quoted a funny line from a primetime television show? The characters may be funny, or you like Linda Lavin, or the lady who plays the other waitress, or whatever. But you know, but hardly ever does anyone say, "Did you hear that wonderful line last night when Field said Bergen has the profile of an avocado, or something?" You know, some really odd.
Well, you're talking about wit now, and most of the television comedy is geared to visual and slapstick, a lot of it, and it's hard to quote slapstick.
Yes, it is. That's
yes,
right.
yes, it is.
Marceau could do it.
Yes.
Go back to an earlier reference. What in the minute remaining? What is In the 9 seconds remaining? What kind of anxiety do you have, Neil?
Well, I tell you, I hate talking fast when people ask me very quick questions.
Well, I think it's awful. I wish you could
Yes,
get back to my
I'll try to do that. Yes, I'll do it as soon as I can. Okay, thank you.
Very nice. Good night.
Bye.
What you're seeing now has to do with a stroke of luck. I found that Tennessee Williams and I happened to be in the French Quarter of New Orleans at the very same time. It's hard to come down here without thinking about Tennessee Williams and Streetcar Named Desire and other things that he's written. And I was delighted to find that he's here, and we are in a, I suppose you would call it almost a too typical New Orleans courtyard. If the movies tried to produce a New Orleans courtyard, it would look like this, but it's a beautiful place.
This is more or less professional courtyard since it belongs to a hotel. It's familiar to me, though. I know it.
You've lived at the Maison de Ville,
Oh, yes,
I think,
live
haven't you?
in that apartment 9.
Number 9?
Room 9.
It's a wonderful old place. And did you write anything in there?
Well, I
other than-
write everywhere.
Yeah. That's true. I know you write every day. I want to talk to you about that later. What is it about the Quarter? I always feel, I discovered the French Quarter about a year ago for the first time. I had always lived in America, but never been here. I feel a little drunk here in a pleasant way without having had anything to drink.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I can prove that to you.
I've never known anybody who who even visited the Quarter who wasn't slightly intoxicated.
By it, you mean, but without booze.
With it or without the booze.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I feel a little,
Yeah.
There's a very calming, very relaxed, very foreign feel about it, and yet it doesn't feel like any foreign country that I know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. What is that? Can you explain
Well,
it?
it's supposed to be 10 inches, or is it 10 feet below sea level? I don't know which. But
It's below
like-
sea level
I
because...
don't think that would have an exhilarating or intoxicating effect. Do you? No.
No.
Have the opposite, I should think. But I always feel well here. I sleep well here.
I sleep like a baby here. I really do.
Yeah.
Is it, you know, I don't know that I can take the heat much longer. You're probably used to this because you've
You're
lived in the South.
perspiring, and
This
I
may
am
be
too.
the first 2-minute program I've ever done. Could we step, you can't imagine what the direct New Orleans sun feels like on a Nebraska boy. Can we step over to the shade for a moment, under the banana tree? And there's a bird talking to us in the background.
Oh, yes.
Are you game, Tennessee,
Yes,
to move over
I
there?
certainly am. If I'm not tripping or anything.
If we seem to walk a little funny, it's because we're wearing what are supposed to be invisible microphone cords. And you're not supposed to be aware of them, but I just called attention to them. Anyway, here we are. Oh, this it feels 20 degrees cooler here to me.
Oh, my Lord, yes.
Can you remember your first impressions of the French Quarter? Did you come here as a kid?
Yes, I had, I came here after my college years, which extended longer than usual because I wasn't a very diligent student. I came here first in 1939, and that time I was terribly shocked by the, you know, the free way of life here, the bohemianism.
It seemed shocking to you then?
Oh no, now it seems my natural ambiance.
But in those days, it was...
In those days, it was rather shocking.
I remember your mother, I know your mother wrote a book about you, and in it she talked about how you first saw the Quarter and how you were taken with it and walked all over the place. And it's ironic, or I don't know, it's coincidental. We're right across the street from the first place you ever lived here, I think.
722 Toulouse, yes, directly across the street. That was the first place where I had a semi-permanent address, yeah.
What was
I
it
lived
then?
in, there are 2 alcoves, and I lived in one alcove, the one on that side, and a tubercular quick sketch artist lived in the alcove on this side.
A tubercular quick sketch artist?
Yeah, he was a quick sketch artist at the Court of Two Sisters, which is right there, you know. You can hear the Mac call from that.
What was 722 Toulouse then?
It
Was
was a rooming house, and the landlady turned it into a restaurant. It was toward the end of the Depression era. And she said that she could make good as a restaurateur if she served lunches for 25 cents. And she said, you can remain a resident here if you will act as waiter and cashier. I said, I have a wonderful slogan for you, meals for a quarter in the Quarter. And so
I get it.
She loved that, and she had it printed up on little business cards. And about half an hour before lunchtime, she had me run out on the street and distribute them to tourists, you know. And we did very well for quite a while. For a month is quite a while, I guess. But there was a photographer, it seems to me, on the floor below who gave wild parties at night, which outraged the lady. And one time I came in around midnight, and she was heating kettles of water on the stove.
You mean she was...
Yeah. I said, are you cooking at this hour? And she said, oh, no. She said, listen to that orgy going on down there. And she took the kettles and poured them on the floor, and she scalded the guests.
That was clever.
Some of which were not fully dressed, and they went streaking out into Toulouse Street. Then came the paddy wagon. We were hauled into night court, and I was a material witness, and I was put under oath to see what I had seen. And they asked me, did she not pour the hot water through the cracks in the floor? I said, I think it extremely unlikely any lady would do such a thing.
Thereby not
well,
telling
they
a lie.
decided that she had done it.
So actually,
and she lost the case, and she threw me out, and I went to California.
your name is, in a lot of people's mind, synonymous with New Orleans, and I guess probably a lot of people would guess that you were born here, and they would guess that you wrote most of your plays here. How much did you actually live and write here?
Let's see, that incident I was just recounting occurred when I first came here in 1939. But I lived here, I had an apartment on St. Peter's after relative affluence occurred in my life, after the menagerie.
Last Menagerie was your first big money?
Yeah, that was the first. And I lived on St. Peter's Street.
You remember the address of that place?
I wish I did. I can't think of it now. I had a lovely apartment under a skylight with a grand piano. And I wrote on Summer and Smoke, and I wrote most of Streetcar Named Desire there.
Gee. I wondered, what about your own apartment now where you live? That's on Domain.
That's on Domain, yeah. Well, it's a part of my rental property. You see, one must have 2 or 3 vocations in life. And if I run out of the playwriting vocation, I can be a
You have property to fall back on. I think it's time to admit that I was in your apartment the other night. It's a wonderful place. I got to swim in your pool, and it's a nice pool. I know you swim every day. Do you swim before or after writing?
Oh, since I write as soon as I've had my coffee, when I get up, which is usually around 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, I always write first.
Well, I want to thank you for letting me display my superb form. I was in your apartment, and it's one of the most restful places I think I've ever been in. It's very, got those great high ceilings that you take for granted down here. Bedroom has those beautiful long
I guess
red
they're around
curtains.
12, 13 feet high. Yeah.
The desk, I noticed, had a manuscript on it. It was very tempting to want to read it. What I thought of was I could see it sitting there, and I thought maybe it would be funny to take it and change the line and see if you'd notice it. But I don't think that would be very funny.
No, it seemed to be all in order.
Yeah. There was a painting over the
Mantelpiece?
mantelpiece, and
Yeah.
it seemed to be from a
That's by Peter Thompson, an Australian, and I commissioned him to do a painting of Arthur Rimbaud. Well, of course, the subject's no longer living, but he looked at some photographs of him, and he painted this, I guess you'd say, imaginary portrait of him.
On the mantel, you have some very old photographs. Are those relatives?
Yes, one is my grandfather Williams, and one is my grandfather Dakin, and between them is my mother's mother, my grandmother Dakin.
But you have a great bed. It's a brass.
Yeah.
Naturally, the first thing a person thinks of when he sees it is the bed in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, or maybe the bed in Streetcar Named Desire. You remember the line of Big Mamas in Cat?
Yes. If a marriage goes on the rocks are here, right here. She said, pointing to the bed. Yeah.
That's right.
But it wasn't a brass bed. It was sort of a wicker bed on a raked stage, I remember.
Yeah.
And Millie Dunnock delivered those lines.
I remember Millie Dunnock saying that line in the Broadway production, and I looked in a script of the play, and in the play it says, "Rocks are there." And I seem to remember her saying, "Rocks is here," and patting the bed.
She
Was that
may
change
have.
made in production?
Actors very frequently improve plays, you know, by their own instinct. If you have an actress like Millie Dunnock, she will say what seems most instinctively right to her, you know?
And you don't fight with the actor then?
Not if it sounds right.
Yeah.
And it's in the same cadence as the original line.
There's a kind of a haunting... What are we noticing?
Oh, beautiful.
Oh, a green lizard is doing a
Usual.
walk-on here. And,
Oh, well.
but I was going to say, there's a very... Can you get the lizard right on the fountain? Because he's probably... This may be his
Beautiful.
big chance. Right. Oh, he left. No, he's looking in for the... He's looking at the fish.
Yeah, there he comes again.
I'm going to see if he can come over here. I can hypnotize him, I think, but... Beautiful lizard. Was he here when you were here before, that same lizard?
Oh, they have a lot of lizards.
Oh, I
yeah.
suppose they change them every day.
Yeah.
I was going to say, getting back to your apartment, the thing I noticed is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
there are no pictures of you with famous people. No, in actors'
Oh,
apartments
there
you
are,
see
but they're in
awards
the,
and you see all
they're in
kinds
the
of things.
file case, all the awards and citations. Most of them are in the possession of my mother.
Your mother's alive.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Alive and kicking, I might say.
Did you have any disputes with her when she wrote a book about you, about how you
I
were
didn't
presented?
think she described my father very favorably. But then I suppose she had her reasons. We we were not very affluent. He was at first with the telephone company in the capacity of a lawyer. Then he was a traveling salesman. I saw very little of him then. And then he was made sales manager of a branch of the International Shoe Company. And he began to see more of me, and he didn't like what he saw. And we didn't get along well. And
But he wasn't all bad, according to you.
No. After he died, I discovered he was rather nice.
I wonder what he didn't like about you. Did he have any idea you were going to be a world-famous
Well,
playwright?
I didn't live up to his concept of the ideal young man, I don't think.
Fooling with words and
Or the
things like
ideal
that.
young adolescent. He didn't approve of my writing. He liked one poem I wrote, finally.
Yeah.
And when he came up to see the menagerie in Chicago, and they had to put a seat in the aisle for him, then he was really impressed.
But he had to get in and also have a seat added.
Yeah.
Well, once you were a success, did he like you a lot more
Well,
generally?
yes, I think he was inclined to. The last picture I remember of him was standing under the marquee of a movie theater in Knoxville that was showing Baby Doll. And the caption said, Tennessee's dad says, I see nothing wrong with this picture. I guess he was associating Baby Doll with mother.
I was just thinking that people are going to say, are you trying to tell me that you sat in a courtyard in New Orleans with Tennessee Williams and drank iced tea and coffee? And that is what we have, isn't it?
Yes, it's precisely what we have, unfortunately. It's the first time I've been on a talk show, Dick, without some sherry, you know?
Is it?
I always bring sherry. In fact, I've got some here if you want to switch.
Well, why don't we see if we can make it to the next segment, and then I'll
All
be glad
right.
to have some. In fact, I'll be about ready to have some poured over my head if it gets any hotter.
It'll improve the show.
You think it will? We'll see if it does. Actually, it's quite comfortable here out of the sun, and I could just sit here for the rest of my life without any problem. Thinking back of that bedroom of yours and that bed, I seem to have a fixation on a big brass bed. I must have always wanted one. You said that you hoped to die in that bed the other night, but you
Oh,
weren't.
yes, it's an ideal bed to die in.
How so?
Actually, I used to be obsessed and terrified of dying. I'm not at all anymore, but I've always visualized that bed as the best place to die on, because I spent 14 years of my happiest nights on that bed, too.
So it deserves to have your last
It
moment.
deserves to have both, don't you think?
I think so too, yes.
I deserve that.
It's a good philosophy. There's a speech at the beginning of Streetcar where Blanche arrives at the house of Stanley Kowalski. I think I can find it here. This is the paperback edition with
Yeah.
Marlon Brando on the cover. And she says, they told me to take a streetcar named Desire and then transfer to one called Cemeteries and ride 6 blocks and get off at Elysian Fields. I have a feeling that people in Europe, and there goes Brando now on a motorcycle, that
Yes,
people in
it
Europe
does
and
sound-
perhaps in America can't believe that those are actual street names. They're too perfect. Elysian Fields,
I've always
Desire.
thought they were
Cem-
rather embarrassingly perfect, but actually there were precisely those streetcars.
What was Desire itself? Was it a street that the streetcar got to here in New Orleans, or an area, or what was it?
It's a section of the city.
A section?
Section of the city,
Yeah.
yeah. And Cemeteries, I suppose, is the necropolis of New Orleans. Have you visited a cemetery?
I have. I walked around in one for several hours one day, and it was...
People put away in mausoleums above the ground, which is a rather grisly idea. Personally, I intend to be buried at sea.
Do you?
It's in my will.
Down one of those chutes and out?
Sewn up in a white sack and dropped overboard.
Seriously?
Certainly, it's in my will.
And that appeals to you?
It's a codicil to my will, yes. I
Well-
prefer the water.
We can leave the subject of death in a moment, but it's interesting. You said for a long part of your life you feared it, and now you've come to terms with it. What did that for you?
Well, when you have lived with cardiac trouble since the age, well, I had rheumatic fever as a child.
Yeah.
When you've lived with it that long and have been told that if you were lucky you would live to be 40, you get kind of used to the idea. And
So
it ceases to terrify you. It just becomes a familiar part of day by day and night by night life.
Every year after 40 has been a bonus then, you feel?
Yes, a dividend.
It's impossible to talk about this town without mentioning names of your plays. Or something. Wasn't Suddenly Last Summer called Garden District once, or something
Yes,
like that?
Suddenly Last Summer was the major of the 2 plays, both of which were laid in the Garden District,
Yeah.
which is on the other side of Canal Street.
Tennessee, what are your favorite haunts here when you come back to New Orleans? Where do you head for?
When I lived here on St. Peter's Street, there used to be a bar called Victor's. And immediately after I finished work, I would go around the corner to Victor's and I would have something made with brandy and cream, brandy Alexander.
Oh, those are good.
And I would listen to the Ink Spots singing a particular record if I didn't care. Would you like me to sing it?
I would like you to. Can you do it a cappella?
No.
Oh.
It's for a very high voice.
Can I hum it?
If I didn't... No, can you?
If I didn't care... I don't know. I can't get... I don't know. I don't remember the melody.
The vocalist, the
Right.
lead vocalist, had a very, very high voice. You remember?
If I didn't care...
Yeah,
Sort of
and
up in
then
there
so
like that.
A bass would talk along with it, you know?
Saying holy mackerel or something.
And I would
like
drink that brandy Alexander and listen to that. And that
Yes.
was the high point of my day.
That
I
sounds
didn't drink
good.
much in those days.
Are you superstitious like most Southerners?
Very, very superstitious. I believe in astrology, tarot cards. I won't walk under a ladder, the whole bit. Also very religious. I think that goes with it too, don't you?
Any particular religion?
Well, I was baptized Episcopalian, and my brother, while I was non-compos mentis, he had me converted to Roman Catholicism, but I didn't notice the difference.
You didn't notice the difference?
No.
Well, why did he have to do that while you were non-compos
Well,
mentis?
he
And
thought
what-
I was dying. I think I was always falling down. It was because I was taking speed and all that. Well, I'd been through all that
Yeah.
before, but he miscalculated.
Are you at this moment a Roman Catholic? Someone else miscalculated every time.
No,
someone
because I
distrusted.
don't see how it could be, because I don't believe any of the tenets of the Roman
I see.
Catholic faith.
But I wondered if you're superstitious in the sense that a lot of Southerners are who believe in ghosts. This town is filled with ghosts, supposedly haunted houses and all of that. Any experiences with that?
Actually, no. I've been in a house that was in England that's supposed to be haunted by a great lady. And I looked all around one night, but I couldn't see a sign of her. There was just a great deal of fog. which is probably what they mistook for the Gray Lady.
There's a place here called the Haunted House in the Quarter, and there's that elaborate legend about how 100 years ago or so it caught fire, and when the people went in to put out the fire, they found that the lady of the house, is it Madame Lalaurie, was keeping slaves inside and torturing them, and they found them chained and in various stages of decomposition and torture and decay. And she was driven out of town, really, or she escaped, leapt with her husband into a carriage, and I guess they headed down the river road and got to Paris, and maybe alive and well in Argentina by now. This was a long time. The Madame Lalaurie.
I'd never even heard of it, actually.
Gee, if you keep hanging out with me, you'll learn a lot about your own, neighborhood. Do you not know the Napoleon House?
Napoleon House I've heard of. Now, what street is that on? Actually, I've never been in it.
I can tell you where the Napoleon is without knowing the street numbers, but it's an ancient house that was, the legend is that when they were going to snatch Napoleon from exile, there was a plot to get him over here, and it was even a famous pirate.
Lafitte?
No, it was another one. I can't think of his name. His last name was 3 letters.
His last name was 3 letters?
Yeah. What's the name of the pirate? He was going to Q or Rue or something like that. Anyway, they were going to try to get Napoleon, bring him here, and the mayor offered him this house. That's why they call it the Napoleon House. And there's even a cult of people who believe that the body of Napoleon was not buried where they think it is, that a dummy was buried, that he was brought here, and that he was buried somewhere in Louisiana. Did you know that?
I'd never heard that particular legend, no.
We people from Nebraska always know these things. And it's a great place to sit of an afternoon.
If you knew where it was, I'd go and sit there.
While Tennessee Williams and I were in New Orleans, we decided to do a little first-hand exploration of our setting. Here we are in the best possible vehicle for looking at the French Quarter, an open, horse-drawn carriage. First time I came to New Orleans, I asked where the place with the iron balcony was.
The place.
The place. I'd always seen that picture, and I thought that was just one house in the quarter that had the balcony.
Yeah.
Turns out over almost
the
all up
Pentalba,
here. Like the Pentalba here. Yeah.
It's got iron balconies all around.
I wonder if it's safe to be out on an iron balcony during an electric storm.
I never worried about that.
Giving you one more thing to worry about.
I think this is the oldest cathedral in America. I don't know the date on it.
Well, it's burned down twice.
Has it?
This is the one that was built by Pentalba. I just read about this today, who built the apartments. And part of the deal was, since nobody could afford anything then after the Great Fire, he offered to build this church for the city. But the deal was that they would have to give a mass for his soul in perpetuity every Sunday. But I understand they don't do that any longer. I guess perpetuity went farther in those days than it does today. And this is the Cabildo.
The Cabildo, yes, just adjoining the cathedral.
And that was the seat of the Spanish government.
Yes.
I also read today in the guidebook that Sarah Bernhardt has been in that building.
I don't doubt it. She made 3 American tours.
Yeah, and Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Do you avoid New Orleans on Mardi Gras?
Yes, I went through it once, and it required so much drinking to enjoy it. I think it's great to go through it once, but I wouldn't care to again. I usually leave town for Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
I like the spring festival, the azalea time, which is about now, I guess.
Mardi Gras you should do once and when you're a young man.
When you're young enough to take it, yeah. People stay completely.
These balconies are so romantic, to coin a phrase.
Yes, you'd think so.
Do you use yours much?
Yeah, I use it for painting.
Only painting?
Yeah, I don't use as much as I expected because I'm usually here in warm weather when it's, I like to be, when it gets too hot outside now.
This is a famous house, and I don't know which one. Oh, Madame John's Legacy, that's the one. This town has more ghosts connected with it. Do you know a book called Gumbo Yaya?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a collection of legends about the quarter and New Orleans.
Yes.
And there are more damn ghost stories per square block of this town than any place I ever heard of. There's supposed to be a lady in white who beckons for a cab at cemeteries and asks to be taken to a certain apartment in the quarter.
Yeah.
And when she gets there, she asks the driver to go up and ask for a certain man who turned out to be her husband, who said that was my wife and she was in her wedding dress and she died in it, and they run down to the cab and she's gone. This is supposed to have happened 2 or 3 times. You think she'd get tired of that, don't you?
Yes, ghosts must lead monotonous lives if they do these things repeatedly.
I guess it's silly to say, is this your old neighborhood, because you've lived everywhere all over the quarter. You wish you'd held on to those old apartments?
There was one on Orleans Street that I would still like to occupy.
We're on Orleans now.
Are we on Orleans?
just turned
Oh,
on
yes.
Orleans.
See, I had this view right up here. And it was very, I really went out in the balcony. There's the apartment right there. The second floor there.
With the iron balcony?
Yeah, I used to go
That was
out on
yours?
that balcony at night.
Oh,
It was
that's a
very
wonderful-
beautiful, that view of the back of the cathedral.
Yeah.
I used to enjoy that balcony. It's the only balcony I really enjoyed going out on. I used to go out on the great field. We're now approaching a convent up here. I think no, that's not it. Yeah, maybe it is.
We're coming to Dumaine.
Yeah. No, the convent is, let's see, where is it? Anyway, there was some graffiti, speaking of graffiti, along the ledges, window ledges of this convent.
Yeah.
One says the city is an experiment. The second one is the city is rhythm, is a rhythm.
Uh-huh.
The third is good luck, God, which I like best because I think it's so unusual for people to wish good luck to God.
Nobody ever thinks to wish God good.
No, they're always asking for his intervention, but not offering it. And this is a St. Louis Cathedral School. Dauphine used to be a very bawdy street. I guess it was the bawdiest one in New Orleans. When I first came here, December 1938, I walked up this street one night, and all along the street, I didn't know what it was at first. I heard these metallic tappings on the shutters.
Uh-huh.
Then I began to hear ladies whispering through the shutters, you know? Come in, baby, you know, and offering various enticements.
Were you afraid to go in for fear that you might not come out?
Well, I just arrived in town. Let's put it that way.
I see. This house on the corner,
That's the Petra.
yeah, that's the one where the Sultan's brother supposedly was living with some girls he stole from a harem, and they found them all murdered one night by the crew of the ship that was afraid the Sultan would revenge his brother on them or something. It's one of those New Orleans legends that, how do we know if these are true?
Well, I don't know how you check on it.
I don't.
The truth is probably there was once a Turk in New Orleans.
Who walked past that house? Yeah. Tennessee, have you ever been in the old Mint building?
You know, I never knew it was the Mint. I always knew it as the House of Detention. Well, it was a prison when I first came here.
It was one of the old U.S. mints. It has a really colorful history. And the city surrendered during the Civil War to Farragut, I guess it was. A soldier dragged the flag down, according to the story, and dragged it through the streets. And he was hanged from this building, and even though
Oh, Lord.
prominent citizens tried to intercede. The director of the Mint was named Joseph Kennedy, and in 1850 he had a party for his daughter Rose Kennedy. Apparently no relation.
No relation?
No relation. I doubt it. I don't think there were.
Rose Kennedy wasn't the daughter of Joseph.
No, and it was
Why?
the wrong century. It's a perfect setting for something, but what? It's a great old building. I got to go inside it the other day, and it's got all kinds of old stuff in there. The jail cells still are there, and you can turn the wheels and the doors clang shut. It's a ghostly place
There aren't
inside.
any prisoners anymore, are there?
Not that I could see. It's completely abandoned. I hope they preserve it. It's a wonderful old building.
Oh, I'm sure they're preserved.
So damn anxious to tear things down these days. It's really a landmark. This is almost too obvious a thing to do, but we're passing.
Passing a streetcar named Desire.
This is the last streetcar, I guess.
Yeah.
There aren't any in the quarter anymore. Somebody claimed that when they took the streetcars away that you had to rename the play A Bus Called Lust. Have you never heard this?
No, I never heard that.
When did they discontinue the streetcars in the quarter?
It was, must have been the late 40s, early 50s, because it was still running in 1947.
Does that embarrass you to have that thing on display like this?
Oh, no. Not at all. I'm trying to think of something that embarrasses me, Dick.
This is without a doubt one of the pleasantest spots in America, maybe in the world. We're on a balcony of the Pontalba Apartments in Jackson Square in New Orleans in the old French Quarter.
I don't know.
It's so
a more beautiful square. With the possibility of Rome, one or two. Not in America, sure.
These apartments are a mirror image of each other. The building over there, the red one, is the exact duplicate of this.
Yeah.
And we were just inside one, and they're the most beautiful places. High ceilings, and they're cool, and they're everything that you associate with New Orleans, as far as I'm concerned. What's the best time of day to sit on a balcony like this? You don't call it a balcony, do you?
Call it a gallery, she said.
Gallery, yes.
I call it anything.
It's a more southern
Think in the
word.
theater, I think of the balcony first.
You can see all the way down. How do you pronounce this? C-H-A-R-T-R-E-S. It'd be Chartres in French.
Chartres.
They don't go for the French
They say
pronunciation.
Chartres.
I can't get
Like
over
they
that.
say Burgundy for Burgundy.
It's just a breathtaking spot. I think we're only a block from the river. And
You can see the river from here.
the thing that amazes me is that we're below the water level of the river. Obviously, that's why there's a levee. It keeps the river from spilling into the town. The last time I was here, it was coming very, very close.
About 8 or 10 feet.
Yeah.
You know.
Have you been here during a hurricane?
No, I've never been anywhere during a hurricane.
What do you make of the lady in the black dress and the high
I noticed
heels?
her going by, yeah. I
Could she
suppose
be a
she's
lady of-
going to confession, don't you?
Could she be a lady of the afternoon?
Yeah, there must be some distinction.
Something about a setting like this, I always wonder why everybody doesn't have a passion to preserve the past and how they can tear anything down, but especially the landmarks.
Well,
What's that street where the Charles Hotel was? I think it's
this was still there.
Must be
They
Charles.
torn that down already?
They've torn down half of the Charles Hotel, which was a landmark here. My
I
wife,
thought they were going to keep the lobby and build on top of it.
old Andy Jackson.
Yeah. They used to have the name of the sculptor around somewhere. I don't see it
Really?
anymore.
Wouldn't you think it would be humiliating to have pigeons sitting on your head day in and day out and still retain your dignity? It's not easy. If people finally stopped saying to you, why do you write about sordid subjects, you'd think...
Yeah,
that
they've
would-
stopped that now.
I think you finally would have lived
And
that
about
down.
the last 10 years, I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
Perhaps I can revive it if I try hard.
You know, I never asked if you were friends with William Faulkner.
I met him, yes. Yeah, I would say we were friends. I met him in Philadelphia, and I met him again in Paris. The saddest and quietest man I ever knew.
Would you have known he was a great writer if you had just met him and not
I
known
think
who he
I would
was?
have known that he was quite an extraordinary person from the quality of mostly his eyes, I think.
Of his eyes.
He usually kept them cast down. And in the Paris, he didn't speak at all. He was with a girl who had worked on Cat, and they were sort of She was sort of his girlfriend, I guess. We were having dinner in a Paris restaurant one night, and he maintained this absolute silence, which made me very, very nervous. And so finally I asked him a direct question, which he had to break the silence. And he looked up slowly, and his eyes were had such a tragic look in them that I began to cry. I mean, my eyes filled with tears. I didn't.
And that was all the conversation?
That was all. Yeah, he answered the question. That was the whole conversation. He wasn't a man who could talk much.
He wasn't manic depressive, was he?
I don't know. This was in the middle 50s.
Yeah.
I think he was a man inclined to melancholy. Struck me that way. He didn't laugh.
I can imagine meeting him. My wife says she feels more a Southerner with every passing year. Does that ring a bell with you? Or you could leave the South forever? If you were exiled like Solzhenitsyn, could you stand it?
Yes, I could. Yeah.
You could?
Yeah, I could stand very easily to leave.
Leaving the South?
Most any place, yeah. Well, not most any place, no. But,
what if they put you in prison and wouldn't give you paper and pencil or typewriter for 20 years?
I'd be quite mad, I suppose.
Would you?
Yeah.
I wonder what that is. It keeps the writer... Some writers claim it keeps them sane to be able to write.
Oh, yes, I would say that's true.
And it's something that talking to yourself won't do, or you have to write it down.
Yeah, I have to. I am sure that... Now, we surely run through.
I think we're going to. We're going to get one of those. What's that line again about this rainy afternoons in New Orleans?
Don't you just love those long rainy afternoons in New Orleans? Yeah.
Yes.
When an hour is not just an hour, but a little piece of eternity dropped into your hands, and who knows what to do with it? You need to carry a knife for that.
Yes. I'm sure you've explained this somewhere, but why is it not Mississippi Williams rather than Tennessee Williams?
Now, you know that's going to lead into a rather off-color joke.
Oh, is it? I can't wait. Let's hear
My
it.
friends call me Ten Williams. Now, what would they call me if I was called Mississippi Williams?
Mr. Williams. Or Miss Williams. or Sippy Williams.
You're going to get off ABC in a minute.
Oh, no, they encourage that kind of thing.
Do they?
Yes.
I'm glad to hear it.
Tennessee Williams is a perfect name. It wouldn't work with every state. New Mexico Williams would be ridiculous, and I was thinking about Nebraska Cavett certainly doesn't make it.
Sounds like a cowboy.
If I had been a writer, it wouldn't have worked. Did you pick that name yourself?
Yes, but I had a very good excuse. Now I'm going to work in something about my family. Is that all right?
Be my guest.
Well, now the Williamses, one was the first senator of Tennessee, one was the first governor of Tennessee, and one was the first chancellor of what they call the Western Territory. He was Thomas Lanier Williams I.
Uh-huh.
So, I heard this all my life. So when I became dissatisfied with being called Tom Williams or Thomas Lanier Williams, I thought I was justified in adopting the name Tennessee. And some people think that I've succeeded only because of the moniker, which may be true.
I mean, if anybody who'd written plays under that name would have succeeded?
Yes, it had some attention.
I think the burden of proof is on them. Do you remember the severe illness, clearly, that your mother talks about in the book about you, that disabled your legs for 2 years?
Oh, yes. Well, what it was, I don't know. But I was very nearly died of it. It was diagnosed as diphtheria, but I think there were many complications. At any rate, I had to go around, I had to crawl around for several months. And then because my legs were weakened, they got me something called an Irish mail.
Yeah.
You ever heard of an Irish mail?
M-A-I-L?
M-A-I-L, yeah, not M-A-L-E.
No, I have no idea what it is.
It's a child's locomotive, three-wheeled, and you propel it by pulling the
I do remember
handlebars
an Irish
back
mail.
and forth.
Yes, I do remember that.
You don't have to use your legs. You don't have to pedal it. Well, I soon got over that disability. Now my legs are my best feature, thank God.
Your mother said that she feared that it changed you a lot, that illness, because you were a very active kid.
Oh, I was
And
I was a tomboy of the neighborhood until the illness.
She pointed out that when you beat up on bigger boys.
Oh,
always,
yes, I was always fighting.
And you never beat up on girls, but you did chase them into cockleburr bushes.
I used to pull my sister's curls.
Well, that's not very violent, but who did you chase into cockleburr bushes and why?
This is something that she remembers that I don't remember, but
It's there in the book. There's another story about you. One day she looked outside and you were, in a brutally hot day, you were digging with a little toy pail and shovel in stones, gravel. And she said, "What are you doing?" And you said, in the dialect that she said you had gotten from your black nurse, I believe.
Ozzy, yes. Yeah.
Digging for the devil.
That's right, I remember
And,
that. That was in Nashville, Tennessee, yeah.
What did you know of the devil at age 2?
Well,
or whatever that
my
was?
grandfather being a minister, he never preached hell's fire. I never talked much about the devil. In fact, he said the Old Testament was just a bunch of fairy tales.
He did?
Yeah.
And he was a minister?
Well written, he said, but just a bunch of fairy tales.
Nice style, but no content. or something. But,
I don't know, but I'd heard about the devil from the nurse, I suppose,
Yeah.
and thought he was under the earth. And evidently I didn't fear a confrontation with him.
Not to put too fine a point on it, people could say you've been digging for the devil ever since in your work, but
Yes, I
It's
think
kind
the
of a
devil and
self-
ghosts are in us, you know?
yeah.
And we must exercise them.
I don't know what mine are.
Well,
How
I
do you
know
find
what
out?
mine are.
You do?
My worst one was jealousy.
How so?
I was jealous of every other writer.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still am to some extent, but I'm beginning to, to get over it a little bit.
Did you hate it when a Faulkner novel got a great
Oh, when
review, or
great writers like that, I wasn't jealous of them. I was only jealous of the ones that were competing on my level, you know?
Oh, I see. You did.
If they were sufficiently great, like Jane Bowles, or Carson McCullers, or Paul Bowles, or Hemingway,
Yeah.
or Faulkner. No, I wasn't jealous of them. I was only jealous of those who happened to have shows on the same block of Broadway as I had when I was a Broadway playwright.
Did you ever read the copy of Gene Stafford's stories that I gave you?
Gene Stafford's stories, I have to admit I never did either.
I think
You see, I don't like fiction very much.
Is that so?
I like biographies. That's why I'm here with this biography of Sarah Bernard.
Why do you
Great
have that?
Sarah. Well, I was going to present it to your wife, but you haven't given me a chance to. You see, she's a great actress, and I thought she would appreciate receiving a great biography of a great actress. Now, this woman was the most phenomenal survivor of them all. At the age of 72, when she was almost dying of uremia, she had a leg amputated and was given a wooden leg. Well, there's a funny story connected with that in the book. If you don't mind me telling a funny anecdote.
No, I love a funny
I'll tell
anecdote.
it. All right. She was, for a while, she was appearing with the wooden leg.
Yeah.
And one night, the curtain was about to rise on Phaedra, one of those classical dramas she did. And in France in those days, the assistant stage manager or somebody would thump the stage with a wooden stick before the curtain went up.
Mm-hmm. Bang,
They'd
bang.
bang it 3 times with this stick. And some critic in the front row said, "Listen, she's coming." They thought it was Bernard's wooden leg.
Of course. What a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
Maybe during the next segment we could get my wife to come in and accept the book and make a brief walk-on appearance.
I don't think she belongs to SAG. Isn't that what she was telling us? She doesn't got the license to appear.
She told us some kind of lie earlier.
She's so
I don't
beautiful
remember what
that
it was.
it's shocking that she won't appear with us.
It is. Maybe with our combined wiles we can get her to
Let
walk
us
on,
try.
pick up the book and walk off. This is such a pleasant time of day in the quarter. The light starts to change and you don't know whether to swim or take a walk or take a nap or have another glass of iced tea or what.
Please don't get up. I'm just passing through.
Nobody's getting up. This game is 7 cards stud.
Well, in that case, I think I'll just collect my book and go.
Where?
That looked very familiar to me, that woman. I know I've seen her somewhere. It resembles
Yeah.
my wife to an astonishing degree.
You must admit that now.
Well, you move so much, and you have homes in various places, and you travel the world. Are you rootless? Where is your spiritual
I'm a
home,
gypsy.
if
I'm
you
a
have one?
gypsy at heart. I have a feeling that if they ever solve the traffic problem in Rome, Italy, I would like to return to Rome and live there.
Gore Vidal is there. That's one writer I can
No,
think
he
of.
lives in Ravello now, but he keeps an apartment in Rome, that's true. But he's very, he doesn't receive me anymore.
Why do writers fall in and out of friendship with each other?
Well,
so,
jealousy, don't you think?
But do you suppose now he has a bestseller, he'd be friendly with you?
I think he might be inclined more to be friendly, don't you?
Don't you fellas have any character? I don't know.
None at all. Writers are the most disagreeable, unpleasant people in the world.
And what about the fact that they booze and drink and have drugs all the time and constantly talk about how each other is destroying each other? Do you know what I mean? Or themselves?
Don't they, though?
Some people claim booze not only doesn't help you when you're writing, but ruins it.
I must say that until the middle 50s, I had nothing but coffee to work. In the middle 50s, I was in my middle 40s, I guess, and I found I needed a little extra stimulus, so I would take a martini while I was drinking, while I was working, while I was drinking, I started to say.
I understand. And was that the road to ruin for a while for you?
No, I found I needed it.
Yeah. Almost a superstitious attachment to it.
No, the tensions of Broadway were getting to me, and I needed something to lower the tension level, and whiskey did it.
I know you've talked about opening night being a murderous experience for a playwright, or at least for you. I suppose some of them love it. They love to get it dressed in a tuxedo and sit right there in the front and beam. But you've said it can be just awful.
I always expect absolute disaster, so in the old days when I was physically able to, I used to get quite drunk. Not only that, but I used to take wash down a barbiturate to get through an opening night. Also through the first reading of a play.
It's not a good idea.
These things I can't do now.
Yeah. You know, there's something about you that surprises me, and you've had some of the greatest triumphs in the history of the theater, and you've had some disastrous opening nights. But why you should care now what any critic would say to you say about you surprises me, because it's embarrassing to have to say this to your face, but you are a monument in the landscape of American literature and all. And why should you care now? They can't tear down the mountain that you've built.
Well, they should have been hacking away at it, haven't they? You read recent notices.
But why do you mind?
Well, because it's my vocation. I love to write. I want to have productions. I have two unproduced plays. I want them produced. David Merrick is sitting on one of them.
Trying to hatch it?
Apparently to incubate it, yeah.
Would you talk to me about Marlon Brando for a minute? You know, there's an argument still rages about whether he was the right person to play Stanley in Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh, my heavens, yeah. Well, Kazan knew it and sent him up to Provincetown to read for me. And Margot Jones, the Texas Tornado, she was called. She was there, and the plumbing wasn't working, the electric lights had gone out, and we were stranded in this little cottage between Provincetown and Truro. And he came in there 4 or 5 days after I was told to expect him. He repaired the plumbing, he repaired the electric lights.
Brando?
Yes, then he sat down and he read, and all of a sudden Margot sprang up and she said, "Get Kazan on the phone." I've never heard such a reading in my life. And of course, I hadn't either. And it was just phenomenal. But he was very cool about everything. He almost invented cool, I would say.
You know, the argument is, of course, that for Stanley, there should be more of a brute, and that nice, gentle quality that you talk about in Marlon.
That
comes
is what
through
predominates in Marlon, is gentleness.
And then some people think that's wrong for Streetcar, that a guy like Anthony Quinn, who can be more of a brute, would be righter for the part than...
Both of them happen to be very gentle people, you know, both Marlon and Anthony Quinn.
They always say if you didn't see Brando on the stage, you really haven't seen how great he is, even though you think he is in the movies.
But
what do they mean by that?
I don't know, because I think people who are great in one medium are great in the other.
Yeah.
Of course, the screen does a great deal for Marlon because you can get close into his face and catch all these wonderful flickers of mercurial flickers of emotion that he has, and that all great actors have.
Say, I can't resist this temptation while you have your reading glasses out. When I was a kid, I saw Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And I've often wondered if you've always wished you could play Big Daddy.
Well, that's the only part I could be suitable for, I'm afraid, but I couldn't play it.
Well, let me preface this with something.
Yeah.
They've said that you have an affinity for women characters in your plays, and they're more vivid somehow and more striking than the man. And there is a philosophy that Southern women are more striking than Southern men. This is another of my wife's ideas this is one I subscribe to. And there really is something more colorful, more vivacious, more witty, more eloquent, more, I don't know what all, about Southern women. You almost never meet a dull, boring Southern woman.
No, you meet very difficult ones, but they're never dull or boring, and they're always eloquent.
That's right.
And so therefore I found them ideal people as protagonists for plays set in the South.
But your male characters are colorful enough.
Some of them.
It may be true that the women outshine them, but Big Daddy is one of the great characters, and this would have people in the women's movement screaming, but it's, I guess it represents a certain kind of attitude toward women, and I'd love to see how you would read it. This is sight reading, and the speech continues on the next page. Do you know the one I mean?
Oh, when Big Mama has just left the room.
Mm-hmm.
Big Daddy says, all I ask of that woman is that she leave me alone. But she can't admit to herself that she makes me sick. That comes of having slept with her too many years. Should have quit much sooner, but that old woman never got enough of it. And I was good in bed. I never should have wasted so much of it on her. They say you got just so many and each one is numbered. Well, I got a few left in me. And I'm going to pick me a choice when I don't care how much she costs. I'll smother her in minks. I'll strip her naked and smother her in minks and choke her with diamonds. I'll strip her naked and choke her with diamonds and smother her with mink and hump her from hell to breakfast.
Next.
Try to follow it.
Very good.
No bravo.
You're a great well, I should point out that there's no audience here. Otherwise, if there were, they would be standing and applauding. Let's try to imagine applause for that. Have you known Big Daddies, men whose only attitude toward women was that, hump her from hell to breakfast?
Oh, yes. I think that's typical male chauvinism, as they call it now.
Yeah.
Big Daddy talked like my father talked, although I never heard him utter this sort of a statement, at least in my presence. So
it's funny how that would have been considered quite racy language on the stage. In fact, was 10 years ago.
Oh, yes. So many things in Cat were considered racy, like the elephant story.
Yeah.
Now they're, just quite acceptable.
Were you limited by that when you wrote? If you wrote those plays today, would you...
I never considered censorship much in writing.
Yeah.
I think I wish I had been writing in a day, writing for Broadway, my major plays for Broadway in a period when there was as much permissiveness as there is now. I could have used some nudity, I think, to advantage,
Yeah.
And I hope if they revive Cat as they did Streetcar, there will be a certain amount of what they call skin. I think as long as skin is beautiful, it's good.
And we're past the point now where it's distracting on stage because you see it often.
You see it
that
so
isn't.
much anyway.
Yeah. Are you a fatalist like some Southern people are?
I've never been quite sure what a fatalist is. Someone who believes that things are fated.
I suppose that
No,
there's
I
a
think
lot
you're
you can do about your
constantly.
life.
I think you're constantly changing your fate. That's why I have no patience with people who cop out, who go into drugs so deep they can't get out of them. And I think you can determine the course of your life to some extent.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of doing, and it demands a lot of, it builds a lot of tension, constantly having to design one's future.
Have I ever asked you this, of how many times in your plays somewhere there's a character who says you just have to go on, or some version of that, you just have to survive?
Well, it certainly represents my own feeling about things. I find it pleasant to go on, actually. I think if I found it too unpleasant to go on for too long a time, I'd stop. But so far, I found it better to go on, especially now that we're into the 70s for some reason. I don't mean of my life, but of the decade.
You look like a man of 50. Are you more than that?
I'm 63, last
Really?
March.
I used to be able to name about 5 places in your plays where there was a version of that line. After Stanley rapes Blanche, and they're taking her to
Oh,
institution,
yes,
and
yeah.
she says to her sister,
Eunice says you just got to go on.
you just got to go
To
on.
Stella, yeah.
And there's a place in Summer and Smoke, and there's a similar line in Cat, and I wondered if you were aware of the
I wasn't
fact
aware
that
of it. I think that much of my lines has been difficult to continue with, but I've always wanted to continue with it, and have.
And finally, you're writing your autobiography, which people have been pressing you to do for years.
Yes, well, I can't publish the thing. It's finished. I have to delay it till after my next play, the one that's so expensive.
Yeah.
Because if it got, if the candor, and I can only write my life story with total candor, it might prejudice some critics, some elements of the media might be prejudiced.
Are we likely to learn things about you that we never suspected in the autobiography?
I think that there will be a great many things that aren't that I've never discussed, even in alleged interviews of the most penetrating sort. But it was the only way I could write it. I didn't want to write one of these whitewashed jobs.
Will you use real names?
I'm going to have to leave that to my lawyers to eliminate all the names of people who were just personal friends who might possibly sue me, or I'd be sued for everything I get. Not that I criticize them badly, but I've found numerous aspects of their character which they might not want made public.
I can understand that.
But where I'm talking about Magnani and Lorette Taylor and, great stars, Brando and so forth, of course I will have to use their names.
Your book may hurt the feelings of some living people.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I'm going to be careful that it doesn't. Because I have to include humorous anecdotes.
Sure.
Because much of my pleasure in life comes from the fun, the funny side of people.
Yes.
And if you omit that from them, then they don't seem quite real to me. I don't find people lovable unless they're somewhat funny. Maybe that's why I enjoy clowning as much as
I know you love to laugh, and
I
yet
love
there's
to, yeah.
There's a dark side to your personality.
Yeah, there is a very dark side to it, I'm sure. But I don't express it in lethal assaults on people.
Have you ever been really brutally victimized by interviewers?
Yes, but one who interviewed me for Playboy, he invented things, actually. Went around the world after that interview. I was so embarrassed.
To get away from that interview?
Yeah.
That's that side of you that I don't understand. Why should you care what anybody says about you at this point? You've proved just about everything anybody could ever hope to in your work.
I've never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
What have I proved? Except that I like to write. And
Do you know if you're a
got it.
success? Do you know what I mean?
I've always regarded myself as not successful because everything I do falls somewhat short of what I would have wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're successful when you fully accomplish what you set out to do.
And you haven't done that.
No. There are some works that I am pleased with having done, yes.
You said that work is my only imperative. Not sex, not booze, not any of those things, but that the one you had to stay alive was work and writing.
Yes, I've
True?
rarely said anything that I didn't mean.
Uh-huh. Well,
I can
that's
stand
fine.
to sleep alone, but I can't stand to eat alone. That's another funny
that
thing
right?
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't stand eating alone. I feel like a pariah dog when I'm sitting at a table alone eating.
if you're alone in a town, do you then go find someone to eat with you, or ask someone to sit at the table?
I will speak to the nearest stranger
Does he?
and say, will you please sit at my table? I can't sit here alone.
Yeah.
I feel so unpopular, you know. Well, of course I am unpopular, but
Are you?
I don't want to feel it. Oh, I have no friends hardly at all.
None?
Well, I have a few, select few. But in Key West, I'm virtually, what do they call it?
Ostracized?
Ostracized, that's the word. Yeah.
I wonder why. You don't-
Because in the 60s I was pretty outrageous.
And they haven't forgiven you for the 60s?
Never.
What did you do then that was so bad?
Oh, well, one afternoon, I had agreed to let the garden club ladies come to inspect the patio of my house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a very hot afternoon, and I decided to come home before they were through. And so I entered the door, and I just shouted, out, out, out! You know, and all.
To the garden club ladies?
Well, that's one of the things that they've never forgiven.
That is about the worst thing I ever heard about anybody. I don't know why they didn't throw you out of town.
Well, they would, I think.
In your autobiography, will you reveal the secret of writing?
I don't know it.
I don't know where it comes from.
Unless it is that you need to express something. Now, as a child, I was I found it very difficult to talk. After my illness, I was sort of a secluded child. I invented games alone, or else I just stayed around, played in the backyard with my sister, and so I became very introverted, and writing is an introverted occupation, I think.
Yeah.
It's something that you do alone.
And is it important to you what history thinks of you 50, 100 years from now?
If it is, it's unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
You don't write for history, you write to express yourself now, in the moment of your life.
This sounds like one of those interview type questions, but what do you think of as an unforgivable sin?
Well, I think I stated that in the streetcar. The one unforgivable sin, in my opinion, is deliberate unkindness. And it is the one of which I have never been guilty, she said. I do think that's the unforgivable sin, but it's practiced quite frequently.
Yeah.